Hello everyone and welcome in today's session. I am Alba Kecha, the Account Manager for Risk and Management in PCB and the organizer of this webinar. Today we will discuss the topic of making decisions under uncertainty and under pressure in projects, which will cover the following issues: the uncertainty that matters, psychology of risk, utility prospect theory, and ways to deal with the pressure in projects. This topic will be presented by Gilberto Costa, a project manager and risk analyst who was responsible for 3 power substations in the rainforest. Currently, he is working as risk management consultant and trainer for several organizations in Portugal. In order for all the audience to be part of discussions and ask your questions, please write down any questions you may have during the webinar in the chat box on your control panel. We will try to answer the majority of the questions in question and answer session and the remaining through email. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the webinar. Gilberto, time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alba. Good afternoon, and thanks again for attending this webinar. We know time is a scarce resource, but we will work to assure you this 30 minutes is going to be worthwhile. Well, just a quick add to Alba's words. My main expertise is in the software area development, which I started in the late 80s, but 5 years ago I started dedicating my time to, at least most of my time, to risk management, to the risk management area, which has given me the privilege, I must say privilege, to work in several projects worldwide, including, but not limited to, the initiation planning of 3 power substations and in the rainforest, and lately I ended up working to help the Brazilian government with the governance, risk, and compliance for the telecom infrastructure as part of the 2014 World Cup preparation. But anyway, I didn't touch their national football team, so they don't blame me for their final results, which it was kind of a disaster. Anyway, I'm currently delivering PMP training and risk management training and some workshops in Portugal. And let's start. Our agenda for today is, let's see, okay. Despite not having time to answer all the questions, you please keep my contact details here, like my email and phone number and my LinkedIn, so you can contact me whenever you want after this workshop for anything you want related to risk management. And this is our agenda for today. We'll see that although the future is full of uncertainty, not all the uncertainty are relevant or important. And we'll see that when we are making decisions, we need to take into account the psychology of risk, which is something that sometimes we missed. And as we have limited time for this presentation, we will only touch the surface of this subject. We then will see that utility theory, for example, utility theory is commonly applied to economics, can also be applied to risk management on our daily duties. Also important is to understand the prospect theory, which is commonly applied in sales by salespeople. This can also help us to adjust our approach when we are dealing with project stakeholders. And finally, we will wrap up this session with some tips on how to deal with pressure in face of the uncertainty in project, especially in project, but it, of course, can be applied for any type of initiative. So, without further ado, if you ask someone to define risk, it's likely that they will come up with something similar to the first 2 lines in this slide. It's expected. That's because we've grown up understanding risk as a situation involving exposure to danger, People say, I risked my life to save my dog, to save my brother, whatever, or whoever. Or my mom used to say, do not use a tent, a stove inside a tent because of the risk of fire. Things like that. People associate risk to threat. But it's expected. That's what average people, and with no offense, but that's what average people understand as risk. So it is expected that people in general will think of risk as a threat, including those people in your team. Don't expect that people working with you will be exceptional. They will be, in general, average. So the ISO 31000 gives us a good definition. And the definition that comes in the ISO 31K is, it defines risk as effect of uncertainty on objectives. And I want to stop here and think about these two words, uncertainty and objectives. Everybody has objectives. You have objectives, we have objectives. And to achieve objectives, we buy, we sell, and we do invest in projects. Therefore, no matter what type of a project you or your team are working on, it must have an objective, and you must know it as the project manager. And the risks can affect the project objectives, such as the project scope, the project schedule, project cost, etc. But the effect that it has or may have on your project objectives can also be positive. So if you are taking notes, keep in mind that risk can also be positive. That's to say, a risk can be an opportunity. And some people get confused between risk and uncertainty, because we've been talking about risk and also mentioned uncertainty, especially when they try or when they are identifying risk. But let's make it clear. Risk is not the same thing as uncertainty. It comes from uncertainty, though. The key is to keep in mind that risk can only be defined in relation to objectives. And let's highlight these two words. Effect of uncertainty, or at least the phrase, an objective. Especially uncertainty and objectives. That's why you and me need to consider that it's so important to have a solid project objective description in your project charter. Because if your project team don't know what the project objectives are, and remember the connection between objectives and effect of uncertainty, if your project team don't know what the project objectives are, they won't be able to identify risk properly. Therefore, you as a project manager won't be able to manage the project risks. So, having the project objective in mind, we then look at the time ahead. In other words, we look to the future, as past has gone already. And uncertainty is ubiquitous, and risks are everywhere. At this very moment, as we are talking here, you might be wondering about things that might happen in the next couple of days, weeks, or months. Let's say things that can happen in the near future, whatever near future means to you. So the first thing you need to consider is the uncertainty. Well, we know that risks come from uncertainty. However, not all uncertainty are risks, because only uncertainty that affects our objectives is what matters. The simplest definition, very simplest definition of risk is uncertainty that matters. And it matters because it can affect one or more of your or my objectives. Risk cannot exist in a vacuum, and we need to define what is at risk. Put it in other words, we could rephrase it as a question, like asking yourself or asking myself. This is actually what I usually do. Let's ask ourselves, what objectives would be affected if the risk occurs? In fact, there are other uncertainties that are irrelevant in terms of objectives, and those should be excluded from the risk process, like this here. So not all uncertainty, let's concentrate on the uncertainty that matters. This doesn't matter, and let's say this matters. Just a subset of uncertainty is what matters. For example, if you are conducting an infrastructure project in Brazil, South America, the uncertainty about whether it might be raining tomorrow in Moscow is irrelevant, right? We are on the other side of the world. The point is, we need to look at the uncertainty through the lens of our objectives. For example, will your supplier deliver the hardware just before the arrival of the team in charge of the hardware setup? Or what will be the impact or effects on the project schedule and costs if the hardware arrives 3 days after we have the tech team on board? How would this impact the team logistics? As you can see, those questions I just mentioned are based on uncertainty, but they reflect only the uncertainty that matters. Only the uncertainty that matters. Because what doesn't matter doesn't matter. And this is what we named as risk. Uncertainty that matters is risk. A reliable risk identification is one of the key success factors in risk management. So don't waste your time with uncertainty. That doesn't matter. Good risk management helps us to see things before they actually happened, thus allowing us to be somehow prepared in advance. Nevertheless, we are dealing with uncertainty. We shall not apply disproportionate effort nor inadequate resources. So keep in mind that adequacy to the reality, according to our project objectives, naturally, and of course, must guide us to avoid spending too much time and too much effort, and to avoid wasting time barking around the wrong tree. And even more, in order to achieve the best possible results in our endeavor, we must also make a clear distinction among the risks. Because some risks are acceptable and some other risks are not acceptable. For those risks that are unacceptable here, for those risks that are unacceptable, we need to provide a response plan embedded in your project plan. And of course, it also works for ongoing operation. But this is for the unacceptable. So responding to unacceptable risk is not optional. It's mandatory. And your team your organization need to work on it. They must work on it. Okay? So just to make sure you understand, for the unacceptable risks, you have to have, or you must have, a response plan embedded on your project. And for the acceptable, of course, for the acceptable risk, you provide a contingency plan and a reserve. Management reserve also helps you in the project, but here I'm talking about the reserve you make in the beginning of the project. Bottom line is, don't waste time and energy on uncertainty that doesn't matter. Risk management is mainly to help decision makers, and project managers, engineers, entrepreneurs, even housewives need to make good decisions on a daily basis. But don't fall in the trap. Listen to me. Don't fall in the trap thinking that you can be 100% rational. That's a trap. Rational decision rules are those that say deciding according to the most advantageous expected value or the expected utility value. In other words, decide in favor of the maximum advantage, usually money, which is statistically predicted. Of course, that historical information and statistic is of great value, but we are talking about events that might happen or not. Some of them had never happened before. So our decision will be influenced not only by statistics and historical numbers that someone provides us, but also by several other factors. And the individual's utility plays a great role in this area. The wealth of an individual, the previous experience, individual's risk, attitude, and so forth. I've seen that despite having nice tools and processes in place, our decisions are always influenced by psychological factors. It's very important to take that into account. The wealth of an individual is, for example, how tight are my budget, my project budget? How tight are our project budget? The project you are working on now. Do we have abundant resource? And how about our team members' previous experience, facing difficulties or experimenting success? All that experience will influence when the people are making decisions. Is our organization, the organization I'm working now, is they willing to take risks, or would it be better to play safe? How do they think? Risk evaluation for business decision making shall consider the psychological propensity towards, indifference to, or aversion to taking of risks, such as in gambling. So we talking about decisions, and decisions are made by individuals. And individuals think different from each other. The varying behavior of individuals with regard to each aspect of risk for the system at issue has a significant, a huge amount, I would say, significant relationship to project risk management and project risk assessment. You know that initially a risk isn't seen in the same way by all the project stakeholders. For example, when you present your, I like this cartoon, when you present your project stage report showing the project constraints and project risk, and hopefully you also attach a alternative plan, because if you just presented the project constraints and the project risks, you're not doing your work as a project manager. You are putting your boss to work for you. So every time you present a constraint or a risk, hopefully you also present an alternative plan. But anyway, when you do that, you shall be aware that psychological factors can and will interfere on the assessment that your boss will do when he or she is considering the available options. Let's talk a little bit about utility. As we have limited time, this subject will touch just touch the surface of this. So utility is pleasure-satisfying characteristic of a good or services, and it is measured in it's measured in units of measurement we call utils. So the assumption is that somehow we can measure it. This is subjective though. And we do utility analysis to investigate how people make decisions and to achieve utility maximization. So just briefly, I'm going to go to use the pizza example. Let's say you have available a pizza, whole pizza, or several slices of pizza, and the first slice of pizza you eat gives you 10 MUs of marginal utility, or we can say units of pleasure or satisfaction. And because it tastes good, you decided to grab another slice. Yum, yummy. But this, although the second slice is still good, it doesn't give you the same amount of satisfaction, see, that the previous one. And thus, it diminishes your marginal utility. So my marginal utility now is not 10, but it's 6. It's just an example, of course. And keeping it simple, if you continue to eat and you eat another slice and another after another, it will reach a point where the marginal utility becomes negative. And consequently, it starts to reduce your total utility. As you see in this chart, the saturation point, the saturation for this example, happened when you ate the 50th slice. Here. Saturation point is where the marginal utility drops to 0. So how does it apply to risk management? Well, risk management is a great tool for decision makers, as I said before, but where we have people making decisions, it becomes quite obvious that subjectivity and the perception one has of value will affect the decision one makes. For example, you might decide to agree to an perhaps it never happened to you, but it happened to me already in the past. For example, you might decide to agree to an almost impossible deadline. because of the marginal utility it could bring to you. But you may end up with a delay that can result in heavy penalties. And if you understand the utility you are facing, you will become more effective. Do not rely that people will make decisions only based on facts. They will make decisions based on their utility. When you see you and your risk team, your project team members, are assessing risk probability, for example, you need to be aware of individuals' utility, as it often taints reality. Sometimes, where someone doesn't want to think about a very nasty event, like being hit by a car when you cross the road, sometimes when you don't want to think about a very nasty event, that person may end up assessing its probability at very low. People say, it will never happen, because they don't want to think about it. And of course, people are much more risk-taking if someone else is taking the risk. Go ahead, it will be all right. And now, some food for thought. How would utility affect your assessment of an outcome where your favorite project, let's say your pet project, could be dropped? How would utility affect your assessment? If you know that that decision could lead to you in a situation where you could be sacked or promoted. Is the utility for any risk situation the same for everyone involved? You don't work alone. Remember that no matter how much mathematics and the statistics we apply to the decision process, it will always have an emotional component. The prospect theory predicts that for certain common conditions or combination of choice, there will be violation of rational decision rules. Prospect theory states that you will take a risk that has a potential loss coupled with a possible gain, rather than suffer sure loss. And that's what happened in project management. And that's what happened with your stakeholders. We need to make decisions each and every day. As I said before, even housewives need to make decisions every day. Even if the information is incomplete and the outcomes are uncertain, we need to make decisions. The mathematical techniques and process can help us to be more objective, but it won't be sufficient. It won't remove decision bias, emotional factors, or other influences on decision making. However, good tools and a well-established risk methodology can counterbalance those factors. In the book, How We Know What Is It Isn't So, of Thomas Gilovich, he enlists several conclusions. I won't be reading all this because this slide will be handed out for you later on, afterwards. But the bottom line here is we tend to believe what we want to believe. And it has a huge, huge impact when we are implementing the risk management in our organization. Implementing risk management in an organization for the first time is a big challenge, but also a big privilege, because that's what makes the difference. Moving forward, everybody needs to deal with pressure, and you probably have been trying to do more than you can actually do. I bet. A great risk or threat to project or initiatives, or anyway, ongoing operation, but for project execution, a great risk is when you commit your total available time, because people used to plan and plan ahead, but when you commit your total available time to the things you know in advance, when you do that, but you don't save time to the unknown and its outcome, that's a problem. And for that reason, you are highly likely to struggle with time. That's inevitable. I repeat, a great risk or threat to project execution, of course, is when you, as a project manager, commit your total available time to things you know in advance, but you don't save time to the unknown and its outcome. And if that wouldn't be enough, you will see people bringing you more stuff to do. So you need to save time for the future, not only money. Anyway, there is no magical formula, but among several approaches I've learned and tried to apply, this is the one which has worked so far, has worked for me. And that's simply to apply 3 filters. I'm going to share with you. The first filter is you need to learn how to say no to people, how to say no nicely. You need to learn how to prioritize viciously. And you need to know, this you already know, or master the skill of planning. So, the first filter, learning how to say no nicely. There are several ways to do. I will just list you 4 to give you a start. You can say, when someone comes to you, you are fully busy, and people come to you, you can say, look, I'm really involved in this at the moment. Is there any chance that you could come back in an hour? I'll tell you what, sometimes people who bother you, they want things at the specific moment, they want right now. And if you can't help them, they will find another way to do. And believe, most of them won't come back. So you keep doing what you need to do. Another way to say no nicely is, look, I can do this, but I can't do that. So make a trade. The third one is, and I put an asterisk here, a star here, because it works especially when it comes from a woman. Say, look, I can't do this for personal reason. People won't ask you to explain. And the lack of planning of someone is not your fault. And the fourth is implement, whenever possible, implement red time and green time. Let's say, when you come in the morning at 9 o'clock, from 9 to 10, you say, okay, I'm available this time to catch up at things that we did yesterday, but from 10 to 11 or from 10 to 12, you put a red sign in your door and say, don't interrupt, and concentrate your time on that. Second filter is to prioritize viciously. And prioritize viciously is important because people think that prioritize is making a list of several things I need to do, and then they start to check and mark, say done, 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 done. It's not a to-do list. Prioritize is not a list. So the thing is, do not create a list of priority. Instead, you must ask yourself, if I could do only one thing, If I could do only one thing, what would it be? Just one thing. Forget about your list. Forget about everything else. Think if you have no other option than other chance than doing just one thing. And what would it be? And once you've done that, then you remove that from your list. And after you have eliminated that item from your pile of stuff, let's say your list, then you go back to the previous question and you ask again. So don't have a list of priority, like I do this and then I do that. Just ask yourself, if I could do only one thing, what would it be? And finally, but not less important, is the skill of planning. Once you have applied the first two filters and managed to reduce your demands, the rest of things which went through the second filter, because you still have things coming through the second filter, you must apply the skill of planning, because that's what good project managers do. And a good project manager must not only be concerned about contingency reserve only. Okay? People are concerned about contingency reserve in terms of money. But a good project manager must not only be concerned about contingency reserves in terms of money. They should also be concerned of reserve in terms of time, his time, your time, my time. Because if you have limitless financial resource in your organization for your project, some projects have limitless financial resource. If you have limitless financial resource, time is still limited. And if you haven't saved, keep in mind, if you haven't saved time for the unknown and its outcome, you will be in serious problem. So save time for the unknown. And that's all for today.
Thank you very much, Gilberto, for your presentation. I would like to ask the audience to ask your questions now. In the meantime, I will start with the first question. The first question is, what are some of the most important issues among uncertainty and risk?
One of the among uncertainty and risk, well, I think you need to make clear that risk comes from uncertainty. And as I said in the previous slides, almost in the very beginning, we need to understand and to realize what are the uncertainty that matters. Because one excuse that I've been hearing in projects from some project managers is, we don't have time to go and identify all the risks of my projects. And I say, well, I tell them, well, you don't need to identify all the risk of your project. Just concentrate on that actually matters, as I said some example. So the big issue here is not among risk and uncertainty. You need to realize that risk is not the same thing as uncertainty. Risk is only a subset of uncertainty, the uncertainty that matters.
Thank you for your answer. The next question is, what are some of the most critical characteristics of the project?
In terms of risk, because of course a project is a unique and temporary endeavor, and I can't say this without knowing the specific characteristics of a project, but general risk that happen in projects are those related to people, to the team project. So from my experience, common risks, threats to the project are those risks that we missed because we assume that we need to identify risk related to infrastructure, related to the bandwidth, related to financial, etc. But sometimes people who are working with us are just about to leave, and we don't know. Sometimes we lose human resource, or sometimes we just missed a good resource that could be available to work in our team, and we tend to miss to identify risks related to people, and also related to people interaction within the project.
Thank you, Gilbert, for this highly informative webinar. And I want to thank you, all the attendees as well, who have joined us today. I hope you all have learned something new today and your questions have been answered. I also want to inform you that this webinar is recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel. The link of the webinar will be sent to you in the following days. Don't forget to check back on our upcoming webinars on topics of your interest by visiting our website or social media pages, www.pcb.com. Looking forward to seeing you all next week in the topic of ISO 9001-2015 versus enterprise risk management. Until then, have a great week. Thank you again, Gilberto.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.